Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Okay, so we want to welcome Jose Hernandez. We are so happy to have you on. So welcome, Jose.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So Jose, I was actually introduced to from a good friend and colleague at work, and she had a lot of great things to say about Jose. And Jose is actually running the Millennial Money Mentor, that's your Instagram account name.
Is.
And many other things, which I never feel like I do justice when I try to give someone's bio. So Jose, to get started, we were going to ask you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about, who you are and what you do. And we'll dig into more after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you having me on. So again, like you mentioned, my primary social media account is on Instagram, the Millennial Money Mentor. And my entire...
Can you say that 3 times quickly right now? Do it.
The Millennial Money Mentor, the Millennial Money Mentor, the Millennial Money Mentor. I'm the only one that can say
it. Someone's clearly asked him that before. I like how
it's so funny because I have to type it out all the time too. So I guess I say it in my mind a lot, but yeah, it's a mouthful, but yeah, that's my handle on there. I'm most active on Instagram. I have a couple other social media accounts, but really my goal with it is to spread financial literacy, which is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. It's the reason why I started all of it, and really just empower other people to understand how to navigate their financial lives throughout their financial journeys and help them understand what it is they're trying to accomplish and be someone that they can look back on one day and say, man, maybe his content or Financial University, which is my educational platform, helped me. Or, I think it's so important to have someone in your life that maybe you didn't have growing up, or you didn't learn the stuff in school. And that's really where I try to play a role.
That's awesome. And we're really excited to have you. Now, we want to talk about all the things that you're doing now and how you got there. But we'd like to start off our interviews by asking about your financial upbringing. So how were you raised financially, and what lessons did you learn from your parents about money?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking that. And that's a big part of my story too. So I would not say I grew up in the best financial background. I'm an immigrant to the United States. My family was born in Venezuela and came to the United States at a young age. So I grew up here and I was raised here, but definitely saw a lot of challenges financially from a socioeconomic background that was not very, I guess you could say, comfortable to grow up in, because there's a lot of lack and a lot of not really good ideas or beliefs spread about money in my household. And I always try to say I really appreciate everything my parents did for me. I know they gave it 100% and can only thank them for what they did. But when I was lucky enough to get educated in the area of finance and work in the industry, you kind of look back with some hindsight and you realize, man, not only were some of those times pretty painful, obviously, but you kind of see there are also some things that maybe could have been done a little bit differently, or some ideas that probably weren't very beneficial or constructive. And I think that the mentality around money and the mindset around money is so important, and it's something that's not really talked about. So yeah, I say that to say I don't come from money. I'm not. I know a lot of people in this industry, in some cases, do come from a better background, but I think I'm an outlier in that sense. So I have that perspective, but also have worked in the industry enough to understand how to think about and use money as a tool productively. So yeah, that's a big part of my story.
Jose, I like how you say, just the way you kind of say it's a big part of your story. And I'm curious, in your reference to, you said, there were some things that were not good ideas or beliefs regarding money.
Yeah.
What are some examples of some of those things, if you're
Absolutely.
able to share?
Absolutely. So I am a personal believer in the idea that credit can be used constructively. And I just remember one of the things that was always said in my household is never get a credit card. Credit is evil. You should never borrow money for anything. And I think that, again, there's some not great uses for credit, which a lot of people get trapped in. but you can also use credit constructively, which I've actually learned in the business world. You have to establish your personal credit so you can build your business credit. You can't have business credit if you don't have personal credit. And things like, investing is not only just risky, but it's basically gambling, which of course is not the case either. And really going back to the mentality of it, it's just the scarcity mentality around money. And I'm a big believer in having an abundance mentality when it comes to not only your life, but finances in general, because when you approach something open-mindedly and you have much more constructive beliefs, you can take calculated risks, but you can take risks and have faith in yourself and make constructive decisions versus just living in fear the entire time. So I think that those are things that a lot of minority households see growing up. And, we talk a lot about like generational things, and these are all things that stem generationally. And, coming from Latin America, I know that a lot of that is still prevalent there.
It's so interesting because it's not really what I thought you were going to say. Because just when you were saying just the idea of, kind of some bad ideas, or not bad, but, less than ideal ideals or beliefs.
Sure.
I did not grow up with a ton of money by any means, but I grew up in a pretty average middle class house here in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And, there were times when money was a stress. I think it was definitely something my parents stressed about, but in the grand scheme of things, we had enough.
Right.
But the beliefs that the things that I look back and think like could have been done better were actually so different. And it just reminds me of the differences in and what you can kind of learn, but the differences culturally, but also just in terms of different socioeconomic statuses.
Yeah.
But I think some of the things you even said are cultural. So I hadn't heard, I've definitely heard a lot, like when you were talking about credit, I thought you were going to say, the opposite, that a lot of people are, acting like credit's free money and, not worried about paying it back or whatever. But even just your point on like, it's bad. That's almost definitely better on the scale of goodness or badness. That's
sure.
Better. Using credit irresponsibly, but just even the concept of, like I've found investing many people can find it very complex and overwhelming, but I hadn't heard that it's gambling and that it's, that's such an interesting belief to have to kind of get past. And I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah. And it's true. And I think it's so important in my space to talk about these types of things, because it's not just, understanding how investing works. That's part of the problem, but I think it's also these ideas and beliefs that were spread in our households growing up, especially if we didn't have some sort of way to learn these things in a more structured manner, right? A lot of people say, well, school didn't do a good enough job of teaching us. In most cases, they didn't. Again, I was lucky enough to get educated in finance, but not everyone has that opportunity. So I think when it's a mix of, not the best ideas or beliefs being spread in your household growing up and you don't have access to it, it can be pretty difficult.
How did your childhood lead you to want to pursue finance in your education and then professionally?
Yeah. So I always say, the finance thing is something that I chose in school. My thing, my entire life was I just wanted to play baseball. I always try to make that apparent, because I know people follow me on social media for the finance stuff, and I appreciate that, but I have an entire past life as an athlete. And I say that because I'm very grateful for the game of baseball, and that's what's really provided me the opportunities that I've been able to take advantage of as an adult. But the reason why I chose finance in school, and I got to school because of baseball, thanks to scholarship, but I chose finance because growing up, I knew that money was important. I saw it firsthand, right? And I knew that money is an important thing to have and understand. And it was something that I could manage as a student athlete and be able to really play baseball at the collegiate level and then still manage to do my schoolwork. So it was something I could manage, but also I knew that there were opportunities in the industry where I could do well for myself. I knew that if I didn't continue to play baseball, I wanted to be in an industry that I could do well for myself financially and serve other people as well. So I think it was a combination of all those things. And, I still very vividly remember a lot of the emotions and feelings growing up just because of the lack of money. And I think some of those things, depending on who you are, kind of stick with you for life. So yeah, I definitely look back on a lot of that and really a part of my mission too, with what I do on social media and everything else I do, is addressing these things, because I know there's other people that have gone through the same.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So maybe talk us a little bit through what you decided to do professionally after college, and kind of, I know you talk about this in your social media a lot, but just your journey through working in corporate America and then leaving that. Like, I'd love to just kind of hear that story, because I think it's a really inspiring story.
So when I was playing baseball, I was working hard to hedge my bets and network and make sure that I had opportunities lined up for me if my athletic career did not go as long as I was hoping, which ended up being the case. And I was very lucky enough to get introduction to a firm in Atlanta, and they're a large investment advisory firm, but they had a team specific here in Atlanta. And one of my teammates, who you may or may not know through Kate, but he was very nice in introducing me to his father, who was a big time advisor for this firm. And just, me being proactive and building a relationship with him, and just giving him an idea of, hey, I know that you work in this space, and I'm just curious about what are some things I can do to get into it. And he basically just gave me an introduction, and I worked to follow up with the opportunity, and I was able to land a role as a financial advisor for the firm. And it was right after my athletic career ended, so that was for me like the next best thing, and I was very excited. I'm the first person in my family to work in finance. There's a lot that goes into that too. And I worked extremely hard at it. Got licensed, and was doing the work. I was a full service advisor for clients, and the team I was with, they specialized in equity compensation and employer sponsored plans, 401ks, for some of the largest corporations in the country. So it was really, really incredible just being a young kid right out of school, having these conversations with people about their stock options and their retirement plans, and actually managing their assets for them. And I learned a lot, and I really treat my time at the firm really like an apprenticeship. I got paid for it. Obviously, I was doing the work, and I was lucky enough to work under 2 CFPs, 2 certified financial planners, that taught me a lot. They worked me a lot. And I'm really grateful for that too, because I think that one of the best ways to learn something in life is to get the hands-on experience. And I think that's where I can go on social media with some confidence in the things that I talk about, because I've done it in a professional setting for other people that have spent their entire lives investing and saving up for retirement. So I did make the decision to leave, which kind of surprised a lot of people. But I'm always honest about this. Right after my baseball career ended, I was in a tough place mentally and emotionally, because you never really plan on that day coming, even if you don't know it does. And I had so much of my identity tied up in it. And the opportunity was such a big deal for me, because I knew I could do well for myself. And a big motivation of mine is really helping and supporting my parents financially, just because I don't feel obligated, but I know it's something that I'm capable of assisting them with. And I saw this opportunity as a way to do that. But in reality, I was using it to kind of fill a void in my life after my athletic career ended. And, I had to start really digging deep and asking myself some tough questions and doing some work internally. And I had to come to that realization. I was like, man, I'm using this opportunity as a way to fill a void. And I don't know how it happened, but I just kind of felt this tug to really take social media seriously and use it to do a good thing, to share the things that I've been learning in the real life industry, and share it with people that are younger or don't have the background or experience in the finance world, or didn't study finance or whatever, just hasn't had access to the information and the education. And it was a tough decision, but I'm glad I made it, because I saw myself as still young and still an opportunity where I could take on some risk in my life and be rewarded for it. And I made the decision to leave the position. And a big part of it was because I couldn't post on social media. Corporate wealth management, just Wall Street in general, there are very strict rules around what you can or can't do in terms of outside business activity and even social media. And, I had to make a decision. And I didn't get a ton of support from a lot of people from it. Like I said, it definitely surprised a lot of people too. But, it was just like a just really big pivotal moment in my life where I made a decision to pursue something that I thought was even bigger. It was going to be even more difficult, but I knew that if I worked hard enough, I could make up for the opportunity costs and do a good thing for other people.
So you mentioned you felt the tug towards social media, but I'm curious, how much of your decision to leave was being pulled towards something you were passionate about versus being pushed away from something you perhaps didn't like about corporate America?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's a little bit of both. And I always try to just say I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity there. I don't ever want to come off like, I didn't appreciate what I had. But yeah, I went through a phase in my life as a young adult where, like I said, I was asking myself those difficult questions and working on being a little bit more self-aware. And I was looking at the people that were ahead of me, and I was like looking at how they were living, and some of them were really successful. Some of them were happy with their lives. Some of them weren't. And you got to kind of ask yourself, like, do I see myself being in that position, being happy, being fulfilled? And I was in a really pivotal place in the business too. I had a couple years in it, and it was really kind of a point in the career where you either stick it out or you move on to something else. So I think that just kind of everything coming together, and compliance coming down on me and saying, hey, you can't do this. And then also me feeling just kind of like I could do something even bigger. I think it was a culmination of all those different things that led to the decision.
Well, Jose, I think what is so unique about your story, and Mike, I've heard this because I heard Jose, you talk about it on another podcast. And so Mike, you may not know this, but what is so unique, and you glossed over it a little bit, but is like I think it's okay to say, because you've talked about it.
Yeah.
You actually got called in by the compliance team or HR or whoever, and told you either need to shut down your social media activity on these topics, or if you want to stay working here, or you need to leave this job. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting because, well, one, when I heard that, Mike, I was like, oh crap, is someone going to call us into,
No.
I work in marketing. Nobody cares what I say. But there's obviously not compliance in those areas. But I thought it was interesting because you did kind of like your back was up against the wall. They forced you to choose. Whereas many people kind of like, they keep dipping their toes in a bunch of things because they're never forced to choose and commit to a path.
Yeah.
And so I think I know we don't know each other well, but like when you were telling that story, I was like, I'm proud of you. I know you
Thank
said
you.
Some people judged you for the decisions you made.
Yeah.
But
that's
you took the
definitely
road less traveled. And I think I don't fully know your situation, but from a distance, it appears to be paying off for you.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the fact that it's paying off for me. I'll say the first year was very difficult, and I can't say that there weren't times where I wondered if I made a mistake, but I think it's just a testament to the fact that if you're willing to work extremely hard and commit to something, and just be able to stay mentally tough and believe in yourself a ton, I think that you can accomplish great things. I mean, just not just on social media, just in life in general. And I think I kind of point to just a lot of the adversity that I saw growing up as a kid. I'm no stranger to having an upward or uphill climb and having things, the odds stacked against me type of thing. So I really point to a lot of things that I saw growing up and how to do as a younger person. And I think I just get a lot of perspective from that as an adult.
Yeah, I like it. Well, even when you were saying, did you make a mistake? I always like to remind people and myself, you can always go back and change things, right? Yeah. So even if you got a year into it and you were like, oh, this was not, right or wrong is relative, but right, you can always go back. You have so many options and paths ahead of you. And okay, so this is interesting timing because it is not aired yet, but we just recorded an episode on financial planning and what we think of it. And I have some I think we both have strong views about it. Mine are like, what's the term I use, Mike? Oh, passionately angry about some financial planners. So okay. I know you are no longer a financial planner, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am very curious.
Sure.
And I actually was like, oh, this is good timing in a way. I am curious to know, it sounds like you were doing something very specific when you were in it, but like, what do you think of commission-based percentage financial planners, just broadly? I just keep it as open-ended question.
Sure. So are you asking asset under management, like wrap fee type of planners, or the ones that try to sell you like a product? And
both.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess both. And to be clear, I'm asking for it for like the average person, right?
Sure.
Like your friends, my friends.
Yeah.
Like, do they need a financial planner like that?
Great question.
And what are the pros and cons of it? As someone who has worked in that industry and sees the underbelly of it all, right?
Absolutely. So when I was an advisor, the model that the firm I was with used was assets under management. So would charge a fee based off of the assets that were being managed, and you have breakpoints. The more you're managing in terms of investments, it gets a little bit cheaper for them. But for example, managing, I don't know what it is now, but managing $250,000, 1% annually based off of the performance of the account. That's how the advisor, well, really the firm, then the advisor gets compensated, not to get into the weeds there. But and then there's the commission base where you mentioned where, maybe they'll sell you some mutual funds, and hopefully they're not also charging you a wrap fee, but I've seen that as well, which I definitely don't agree with. And then there's the fee-based planning where they charge you kind of like a flat fee, and they provide you with the planning, in some cases, the investment management as well. And it's all kind of just wrapped into just a flat fee versus assets under management.
And that's like more like a fiduciary on the fee.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can be a fiduciary too and have the assets under management model. Fiduciary basically just means that you're doing what's in the best interest for the client, which is kind of a gray area sometimes. But to answer your question, so I think the assets under management model can make sense at the higher levels of net worth where you get the break points, right? No one's going to charge you 1% on $5 million. At least I don't think so. But 1% on $100,000, that's a big deal, right? Especially when we're in what we call the asset accumulation phase of our financial lives, where we're building wealth, we're building assets. That 1% can really work against us. So I think that for someone that's not quite there yet, or they are still working on building their wealth, I don't think that the asset under management fee model makes a ton of sense. As far as the commission, I've seen a lot of not great things in this space as well too, because it incentivizes financial, I guess you can say, professionals to really lead with a product versus asking the right questions and understanding what is actually best for this person and their financial goals and their circumstances. And I think that kind of thing can set up an environment where the representative can just basically sell this person a whole life policy, and they're like, hey, this is best for you. And then, they get a nice check and never talk to them again. That's clearly not a good model either. I think for the younger person or the average person where they want to have a plan in place, maybe they have enough investable assets outside of something like their 401k that they could use some help with. I think that's where the fee-based type of model can work. And I actually know a good amount of independent advisors in the space that use that model, and they focus on younger clients or people that are not quite at the stage of their financial lives where they're drawing on their assets. And I think that can make a lot of sense for people, but it really just comes down to the individual, where they are in their financial plan, their financial life, and how much help they really need. If your situation is not super complex and you feel like you have a good grasp for what you're trying to accomplish financially, you may not need all that, but maybe you are someone that has a lot of complexities financially. Maybe you have some businesses and you have to be working with accountants, and who knows what you have going on. So there's no one right or wrong universal answer. I think it all comes down to the individual.
We got a couple of follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
In case you couldn't, pick up on the subtext of Maggie's question, she has some very strong opinions about this.
No, but I liked Jose. I mean,
you were very tactful.
He was very tactful. Yeah. And right. I mean, it was good thoughts.
So one of the things we talked about in our episode was that it seems common in the industry to make people believe that their situations are more complex than they really are.
Right.
And that they can't manage it themselves.
Yeah.
What would you say about a normal person's ability to learn some of these things themselves?
Yeah, I think that it's very manageable. And that's part of the reason why I created my educational platform, Financial University, on top of what I do on social media, is to provide people with a structured way for them to be able to learn and apply these things on their own. I think that it's really like anything else, learning anything new, whether it's learning how to play an instrument or how to really learn a new language. It is kind of a new language in a way, but if it's important enough to you, I think it's something that you can manage learning. And especially if you're not in a place where you have all these different complexities in your financial life, maybe you do have the ability to sit down and at least learn the foundations of what does a real financial plan look like, and what are the things I should be focusing on from a high level investing strategy, and what are some of the things I should be focusing on to improve my current financial picture. So I don't think that these things are impossible to learn, and especially if you don't have a lot of different complexities, like I mentioned, I don't think it's unmanageable. It really just comes down to your willingness to learn it, I think.
Yeah, I like it. I think that's a great point. And it just on your willingness to learn, right? Because some people, they don't want to, they don't have the time, they don't even have the mental,
Right.
they just don't want to give up the mental space for it.
Yeah.
And in that case, that's when, it makes sense to outsource a number of
Sure.
things. And I will say just two comments, and then we'll move on because we want to talk more about your financial university. Two thoughts. One is, one of our biggest points of why you like this episode, which will air before yours will, so I can reference it. One of the biggest points that we talk about kind of, and why we're kind of knocking particularly the assets under management style of financial planners, and then also the commission-based ones.
Right.
You already spoke to commission-based. Like, anyone who tries to sell me whole term life insurance, to me, huge red flag. Is that a red flag to you, that like they don't maybe have your best interest in mind? Yeah.
So I think that in the right circumstances, a permanent life insurance policy can make sense, but it's extremely rare. It's extremely rare.
That is a great way of saying
well said.
Those right circumstances are very rare. Yes.
And that's really like with any kind of product or instrument in a financial plan. I mean, generally speaking, annuities are probably not great, but is there a client out there that they can make sense for? Sure. I've seen it, but it really just comes down to understanding, like, how does this or how does this not fit a role in my overall financial plan? With life insurance, you should see that as a risk management tool. It's a way to protect the people that you leave behind if you were to pass away prematurely, or if you're concerned about estate taxes, it provides liquidity for your estate. So those, I think, are the primary tools for life insurance. You can get a little bit more fancy with it if you want, but 9 times out of 10, that's what people use it for. And for younger people, their main concern is, hey, I have these kids. If I were to pass away, I want to make sure that my income is replaced. For the majority of people, something like a term life policy makes sense. Yeah. Now, I'd say the only time, not only time, but one of the main times where something like whole life makes sense is if you're younger and you have issues with your health, and it's going to be harder to become insured down the road, and your premiums are going to go way up, and you want to lock in a lower rate now, you want to be insured for the rest of your life, maybe, but that's not the case for a lot of people. So it really just depends.
I think what you hit on is, like you said, it's not the case for a lot of people, but there are way too many people who will try to sell anybody that product.
Yeah, because that's how they're incentivized.
Yeah,
that's how they're paid.
And that's what I should clarify is what I get so, as I call it, passionately angry about is people that take advantage of other people.
Definitely.
Right. And I should actually, as much as I focus sometimes some recent discussions on financial planners, I should note, look, there's bad apples in every industry,
Definitely.
right? You can get a bad doctor we were just talking about this, dentist, Mike, who are trying to convince you that, kids have a bunch.
Don't get me started.
I know
on
Mike's going to get
so stressed.
But what I mean? You can get a dentist who's just trying to like bill insurance for crap and not actually like thinking about what your child actually needs. And so I say that as in just to even preface all my own points of, there are bad apples in every single field. And,
Definitely.
And so you just have to be careful and make sure that you're educated enough to avoid them.
Absolutely.
But thank you, Jose, for answering that. Because it's actually, I think it's interesting to hear it from somebody who was in that industry. Oh, sorry. I will say it. So the second point I was going to make, just in response to some of the thoughts you shared, is a lot of the points we make about why the average person doesn't really need a financial planner is because again, they often can try to make it seem like investing is really complex.
Right.
And the average index fund that follows the market, that's a low cost ETF, is what most people need and should be investing in, right? And that's our other point of like, people can have a way of overcomplicating it, and there's simple things that anybody can do tomorrow to start investing that isn't choosing stocks or day trading or doing, all these more complex things.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think that the advent of robo-advisors too is something that is going to affect the traditional financial advisor industry. And I saw a little bit of that when I was still in that space. And, part of my investing strategy is through Betterment, which is a robo-advisor. I still have my licenses. I'm fully capable of managing my own portfolio too. And I do own some individual stocks too, but that just goes to say that there's a lot of value in, I think automation is one of the biggest things that you can use as a tool, especially in the asset accumulation phase, because returns are great, but what's really going to move the needle, especially in the beginning, is your savings rate, how much you're accumulating assets over time. And if you want to get ahead, then you can increase that, whether it's something through like a 401k where it's super easy, where it's through your employer, or other forms, maybe through a brokerage account or whatever. The nice thing about automation is you don't even think about it. It's going straight to work for you. Those assets are compounding over time. So yeah, I think that the indexing route makes a ton of sense, especially getting started. And the concepts behind it aren't super complicated. I think it's something that anyone can really understand and apply. So yeah, I really don't think that working with a financial advisor for performance is a great idea anyway, because I can tell you, the portfolios that a robo-advisor is going to provide you is 9 times out of 10 very similar to an ETF portfolio that a full-scale financial advisor is going to provide you. I saw it. It is what it is. I'm not saying there isn't value in an advisor. There definitely is. It just, you have to be in a place in your financial life where it's worth paying for. So
yeah, I actually love how you just validated from someone who is experienced in this industry one of the points we make, which is your performance isn't any better. But even just the way you said that around, if you're going to do it for performance reasons, that's not the reason. Now, if you just want to outsource it because you don't have time and you can't deal with it, that's a whole nother personal decision.
Absolutely.
Jose, you mentioned in a recent podcast interview that you did on another podcast that Wall Street and that industry is so reluctant to change. And you were kind of alluding to a couple of things just then, even with like robo-advisors. Like, what are your views on how that industry does need to change, just based on your own experience, kind of pre and post? Yeah,
well, a lot of securities laws and things that hold the industry back were written in the 1930s. I mean, the Securities Act in 1933, Securities Act in 1934. I mean, those are the laws that a lot of these firms are still following today. So I think that may have a lot to do with it, just sticking to tradition and laws that were put together almost a century ago and don't really recognize the way that the world's heading. And I think it's unfortunate because, there's a chance that young talent can maybe go another avenue, maybe the independent route or something else. And especially with something like marketing, I'm in the social media world, which is basically marketing. It's really important to be able to communicate things in a way that the target audience can digest and appreciate. And I think a lot of these technicalities, a lot of these legalities, a lot of these just unnecessary roadblocks are going to harm the industry because, maybe right now the wealth is more concentrated towards the elder populations, maybe, but you always hear about the big wealth transfer. And I think that, my generation is probably going to benefit from that a lot. And from the firm's perspective, they're going to be losing out on a lot of potential business to something like Betterment or Wealthfront that can clearly communicate the value to the people that they're trying to target versus the structured, rigid, Wall Street, this is how we need to say things type of thing. So listen, I understand that there's laws. I understand that there are things that need to be followed. I completely understand that. But I think that we're going to continue to see a really big shift in people's perceptions of Wall Street. I don't think that a lot of people trust just hearing Wall Street. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't like that type of thing. And it doesn't need to be that way. I mean, I know plenty of people that are part of that world that do great work, are really smart and do good work for other people. But, Yeah, I think that if the industry does not find a way to realize that we're in the 21st century, it might not be great for it.
So that's a really interesting assessment of the industry. And I think the generational changes that we're going to be seeing. How does your current activities fit into that with Financial U? Can you tell us a little about that product and how you see yourself in this change?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Financial University is my online educational platform and has a built-in community for people that want to learn the ins and outs of personal finance, investing, financial planning, all the things that you really need to understand if you want to manage your own financial life and build wealth for the future. And I wanted to create that as a way for really anyone to be able to accomplish these things in a way that is not intimidating, is actionable too. It's not just information, but it's actual things that you can take and apply. And I wanted to have that put in place for people to really start making serious progress in their financial lives instead of feeling like it's all so overwhelming or not manageable. And that's why I love just hearing from the community when they say things like, I thought I needed to be making a lot more money to make progress with my finances or start investing, and going back to a lot of these different beliefs and things that stem from, maybe not a great environment or just not knowing. And, I wanted to come up with a solution to that. And a lot of people in my generation really point towards school, saying, school did not teach us these things. And whether or not it's this education system's fault or not, it provided me with an opportunity to fill a gap there. And it's been really great to see it be successful and actually make, meaningful changes in other people's lives and really provide them with the tools and education for them to be able to make their own decisions. I didn't make it to where I'm trying to find people to become clients so I could advise their money. It's more, how do I provide people with the education, the context, the resources for them to take all this information, apply it, and also be self-sufficient enough to maintain their own financial picture throughout their financial journey. So that's really been the vision with it, and that's how we've been executing on it.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And as much as I can be negative about financial planners, the concept of Financial U is actually what I love, right? Do you call it Financial U or Financial University? Okay.
I call them both, Financial U, Financial University.
I guess it's like college, right? It has you can call it all sorts of different nicknames.
Yeah.
But it's what I love. Like I'll actually I'll give you many compliments, but one of my pet peeves, and Mike knows I have a lot. He's like, where are we going to begin? No, because he doesn't do my pet peeve is when there's so many content providers out there, and I'm sure you are very familiar because you probably look at a lot of them given the business you're in, that have a lot of like kind of bait and switch, and like they don't just tell you the price up front, and there's a lot of like kind of just unnecessary sales tactics. I'm not saying they don't work, but do I think they're like the right way to put your product forward? I like that your product, it's very clear what you're going to get. The price is right there. You can see it. And it's a reasonable, affordable price for people. So I don't know if you want to name your price or if it fluctuates. So maybe you don't want to say it. But.
Yeah. So right now we have 3 primary courses, and they're priced individually at $149 each, or you can buy them as a bundle at $299. And I always forget what the average cost for a 3-hour community college course is, but I know it's under that. So it's affordable financial education that you can actually apply and actually make real significant progress, not only now, but it's designed to be something that you can use in the things that you learn, the habits you develop, and everything else we talk about really for your lifetime. So again, going back to filling that gap or that need in the traditional education system, I wanted to, plug that gap as best I could personally and still make it something where it's not, $5,000 or whatever. So yeah, definitely. We always thinking about from a business perspective, pricing models and everything else like that, but we always want to keep it to a point where it's manageable and it's something that is way more valuable than what you pay for.
Which I think is great, right? It makes it much more approachable for the average person to engage in meaningful content, but at the same time, pay when there's a value for something that, you put a lot of time and energy into. What are you most proud of since leaving corporate America, whether with Financial You or with something else?
I'd say just the fact that I stuck with it and finding a way to hold on to the vision when, things are not as clearly in front of you and this thing is going to work out type of thing. I think with anything, something that I always try to tell people is if you go to somebody and ask, hey, do you think that I'll be good at this? Or do you think this type of thing will work out for me? I think you're asking the wrong person, the wrong person, the wrong question. Whether something is going to work out or not is largely up to you and your belief in your ability to make sure that it works. And it's definitely been a lot of mental and emotional tests throughout this entire thing. So I think the main thing I'm most proud of is the fact that I've stuck with it. And it's funny to see people come around after it all started and say, man, I'm seeing you doing you have the social media thing going and all this other stuff. And, I'm not the type of person that holds grudges, but it's cool to see that. And that people actually realize that this is a very legitimate thing. But then aside from that, I'd say just the real impact that I've been able to have on other people. I know that I did good work for other people when I was an advisor for them, but it's also cool to see the people that I'm serving that maybe they're not at that point of their financial lives where they need asset management, but they're in a point where they need to make important financial decisions. And early adulthood, your 20s or 30s, that's a critical time in your financial life. And if you don't do things the right way, you're not going to get to the point where maybe you need to be working with someone to manage your assets for you. And, I just think about so many of the testimonials that we've had within Financial University. Like, one of my favorites is from a girl named Fabiola. She always talks about, I thought that I needed a lot more money to make progress in my financial life. But a big thing that we talk about is just the importance of goals and understanding what you're trying to accomplish, because that gives you the context to make important decisions. And her thing was she had this idea of starting a boutique for eyelashes, kind of like as a side hustle, but she made the commitment. I know this is something I want to take seriously. And she actually ended up being able to replace her 9-to-5 income with it because she stuck with it and understood, because that's a big part of my financial goal. I need to dedicate time and energy to this, and it worked out for her. And now she's starting to get into real estate, and just seeing things like that. It's awesome. It's really, really awesome. And I think that's kind of just the entire point of all this is, to serve as someone that can really be a catalyst for other people in their financial lives, even if it's not, managing $250,000 or $500,000 for them.
So you've come a very long way, and you've kind of gone the full spectrum from when you've grown up to education and then professionally, and now you're changed in profession. And so I want to kind of go back to our first question about how you were raised financially. Yeah. And can you compare it and contrast it to how you live your financial life today?
Night and day. I'd still consider myself to be in a middle class position now. I could be a little bit more responsible and pull money out of my businesses, but from a planning perspective, obviously, reinvestment and stuff like that's important. But it's just so, and I always try to remember to keep things in perspective. But just the way that I live now compared to how I grew up is just night and day. The problems, I don't even want to call them problems. The challenges that I have now in my life are good challenges to have. When the problems and the challenges that I experienced growing up, they're not healthy challenges to have. They're things that no one really should have to go through. And again, not a knock on my parents, just is what it is. But I'm just extremely grateful, and I'm an extremely competitive person. I think my athletic background has a lot to do with it. And, I have peers that are in business that are way more successful than me. And then there's people in this industry that are way more successful than me, and maybe they have more time in the game or whatever. So I'm always like, I need to be like getting to that point and everything. But sometimes I have to take a step back. I'm like, man, it's very, very, eye-opening to understand just my quality of life now compared to the quality of life, I had growing up and in the income my parents had growing up and, still kind of have now. So yeah, I really think about that a lot.
I think that is a very insightful reflection, Jose. And I I thought it was interesting how you just in saying that you're competitive and you compared yourself to other friends who are, quote, more successful than you. I would say success is all relative, right? Like you're doing that. They may be, outwardly successful of what you see, but you're doing really meaningful work. And you just, I think as I get older and older, and I'm 40 for what it's worth, is that might be old to you. But I have just more, I place more and more value on just the meaning of what I'm doing and the value it's adding back to society, and not the amount of money I have or the amount of money I'm able to make, or, more of like, what can I, and I don't even mean that in a cheesy way, but like it means something and it feels good. And I just think it matters more. So.
It does. Yeah. I try to keep that in perspective. I personally see money as a reward for service that you're rendering, and the more people that you can serve, or the higher level of service you can provide, maybe to like corporations, whatever. I think it could be a gauge for that. And I try to think about it that way too. And from a business perspective, I'm thankful for the level of income I have now, and I do well for myself, well for my age. But, I try to think about it instead of like, okay, how much money can I make? It's like, how many people can I serve, or what types of problems can I help, solve and be compensated for it? So I think it's just like being able to structure these things in a healthy way. And it's not just like how much money can I make type of thing, but like how many people can I serve and how can I be rewarded for it? I think that's a really good reframe for it.
I like something else that you said earlier in the discussion that I didn't get a chance to comment on, but you talked about helping your parents. And I really like the way you said, I don't feel obligated, but I know it's something that I'm capable of doing. And that is big, because I think it's actually an interesting discussion. We talked about doing a show on, of just, having financial discussions with your parents, helping your parents, which I know I've actually had some fascinating discussions with some coworkers around even just the cultural differences and the expectations of helping your parents in different cultures and nationalities. But I love the way, because I think there's people who feel obligated, and I've heard them use that term, but I like that just the way you use the word capable of doing it.
Absolutely. Going back, I'm a competitive person. I expect a lot out of myself, and I think of myself as someone that's capable of doing great things. And one of those things is making sure that, my parents' lives are comfortable as they get older. And, it feels good to be able to make sure that they're not as pressed for money as they were in the past. And, they don't have a ton of assets to their name, right? And I do feel a little bit of pressure sometimes, but I think it's like healthy pressure. Yeah. It's like, it's a good problem for me to solve. And it's unfortunate when there's people that feel, I don't know what the right word is for it, but they feel not obligated, like resentful? But there's that's exactly resentful for the fact that like, I have to cut my mom or dad a check or something like that. Like, that's not how I view it at all. It's like, I am extremely aware of the sacrifices they made. Like, I saw it growing up, and, for them to leave everything they knew, even if it wasn't the best circumstance, I can't imagine leaving an entire life to go to a completely different country where I don't speak the language. So just my kids can potentially have a shot at a better life. Like that, I can't even imagine. And, it's, again, just perspective, but a big motivator of mine is, of course, I'd love to live a nice life and do things that I get to do growing up. But a big motivation too is like, helping them pay their mortgage off and making sure that they're comfortable and they don't have to worry about money. They can worry about other things. So
that's great. I'm sure they are incredibly proud of you, and I'm excited to see what is ahead for you, because you've already done so much at such a young age. So I'm sure there's a ton more to come. And the other really just side comment on what you were just saying, even just about resentful, is I think anyone who has their own kids, which Mike and I both do, you sort of lose the feeling of ever feeling like you'd be resentful about helping your parents, because unless your parents were like terrible to you or, did something terrible, because I think about even just, when I had enough growing up, and my kids have plenty, but just the way I know what I do for my kids every day, and I know what I give up in terms of, my time and identity and soul some days in virtual learning for a whole year. To where I think, I even think about my mom. I have so much more respect and appreciation for my own mother and what she did and what she gave me growing up, that I just would, unless she was like, mismanaging money I was giving her or something like that. I just think those feelings of resentfulness, though they could be there for many people, often go away when you have children also. Okay. So we really appreciate you coming on. I have enjoyed this discussion. And again, I think what you are doing is really cool. And I'm excited for you on the success you've had so far. And I'm excited to see what is ahead for you too. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, my primary social media outlet right now is Instagram. My handle on there is all one word, the Millennial Money Mentor. You'll find it.
We'll put a link to the show notes also.
Yeah. And I have Twitter as well. It's Jose_TMMM. Twitter doesn't allow me to write all that. So I went with Jose_TMMM. And I'm posting a little bit on TikTok now too. It's the same handle, Jose_TMMM.
Are you dancing on TikTok, Jose?
I'm not. Okay. No, I repost my Instagram reels onto there.
I like how you're like, no, I got standards. Like, no, I'll put the content, but I'm not going to dance while not to knock anybody who is.
No, yeah, it's just you see the growth on there. So I guess it's just, why not just repost when I'm already posting on there. So if you're on TikTok, I'm on there too.
Yeah, so we'll put all those links in the show notes. And yeah, we just really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. And our thing is we like to talk about money, and we think talking about it brings so much value and improvements to everyone's financial situation. So I think these discussions are so important. So thank you for taking the time to come on and talk with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate you thinking of me and having me on. And I agree. I think that it's great that we're getting to a point now with podcasts and social media and everything where we can talk about money constructively. And like I said, maybe sometimes people didn't have an outlet or a place to where they could talk about it, have questions that they can get answered without being judged. So I think it's great. And I appreciate everything that you guys are doing in this space too.
All right, Jose. Well, it was great meeting you, and really awesome conversation. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.